of everybody here. So as I've spoken about already, this is a Shabbat Nachamu, a Shabbat of comfort. And I think we can all say that everyone who has a heart that's open and a mind that's looking out at the world knows that we all need comfort, and we all need to be comforted, and we're called upon to comfort others. And as I mentioned, and as you know, it's called such because this is Shabbat after Tisha B'Av, and we heard the words of the prophet Isaiah, "Comfort, O comfort my people." And we find a promise of God's presence amongst the people, not just our return. There's a verse in the Parsha that I find connects us to a central idea. It's about a promise from an even earlier period in our history. And my sense is that in this verse, there's a lot for us to learn. It's very informative of our perceptions of ourselves and the lived realities of this very day. Near the end of the Parsha, after God makes these promises and the kind of the contingent realities of our going into the land, and that is that it is connected to how we and whether or not we will survive and thrive in that land. He references that we are a special people to him and a chosen people to him. And in that, there's much to talk about and much to learn about. And he says, it's not because that you are the most numerous of people that the Lord set his heart on you and chose you. Indeed, you are the smallest of people. Previously in the Torah, we've read that God will make us as numerous as the stars in the sky, as populated as the sand on the shore. This doesn't reflect a small people. King Solomon spoke of himself as being part of the people that you have chosen, a great people, a people who are too numerous to count. Today, we live in a time where there are lots of surveys that are done, and people are counted for all sorts of reasons. And we know, after millennium, that we aren't so numerous. In fact, we're a very small people. How small are we? Well, we're probably less than 1/4 of the world's population. And that's quite small, and it's particularly small when you think of the amount of attention that we receive. A commentary on the words as to why we were chosen, the commentary known as Targum Yonatan states that it's not about pure numbers, but rather it's about self-image. And that is, we are to be the smallest of people, the most lowly and the most humble of people. And that's a difference. We are commanded to be a humble people. Rashbam, Rashi's grandson, explained that in this context, we were about to enter the land. It would mean that we were going to war against 7 nations. And we would succeed and we would conquer the land, in spite of being terribly outnumbered, in spite of being small. We would become large victors. And so this smallness will be measured in relation to the numbers of our enemies. And we would realize that there's another force that drives us and that's with us and allows us to succeed. And so we're called upon to be humble. We know how small we are in this world, and we know we get a lot of attention. And we get a lot of attention because of our influence, because of our power, because of our wealth. The attention is also due to extraordinary intellectual and technological achievements. We've contributed mightily to the advancement of civilization, way beyond our numbers. So why are we small? Maybe we're small because of persecution and exile. Maybe we are small because of the generations of forced conversions in various periods of our history. We're small because of gas chambers. We all know that 6 million out of 12 million of our people were killed a generation ago. Half of the population of the Jewish people were lost. But our numbers are also about something else. It's also about the fact that we never attempted to convert others. Our mission was to create a people living with a particular way of life on our own land, and from there, to be an influence for good. Those who wish to join us, those who wish to come to us are welcome, but no one would ever be coerced. It's not the case with the other great religions of the world. We know that. Those other religions for centuries had a mission that was universal, and the strategy of that universal mission was to convert others, even forcibly. There's an internal justification to this verse of being chosen because we're small. That's found in another place in the Bible, and that's in the book of Judges. I might have learned this in a class, but I didn't make sense out of it. Don't remember it from there. I remember it from standing at a spot with a tour guide in Israel. And there's an episode that's described in the book of Judges where God commands Gideon to assemble a fighting force to defeat the Midianites. And Gideon assembles a force of 32,000 men. And God says, there are too many men. I cannot deliver the Midianites into the hands of Israel, because then the people will become haughty, and they will say, it's my own strength that saves me. And then there's an event that leaves only 300 men to face the Midianites, and they succeed. And they realize that their power comes from someplace else. They're saved by God. I don't know whether or not I'm a believer in the supernatural. I don't think so. I don't necessarily believe in that type of intervention, but I believe that the narrative is informative, and I believe that our narratives serve as metaphors to create values. In fact, in this day, I, as many of you, believe that we have in our hands a program, and I'm referring to the Torah and the prophets, and a process for ethical and moral living, because I believe that Judaism is a values proposition, and that's what I always teach. That's what I'm devoting my life to. And just as being the smallest people is meant to help us internalize our limitations, and more importantly, help us to be able to live with humility. Daniel Hartman, my teacher and my friend, once asked, when do you think that Israel and the Jewish people began to strut? Don't you know that strutting will be our undoing? And I think about this a lot when I get these emails that talk about the great Jewish contributions to the world, which we are all really aware of. But I'm bothered by it in some ways, because I think that on a personal level, when we have a success, it's not for us to announce it to the world. If we're good at something, we don't have to tell everyone. If we make a contribution, let the contribution speak for itself. Arrogance and strutting does no one any good. I believe that we can learn that true power, that real power in this world, comes with humility. I repeat it often because it's repeated through the Torah so much, and that is our chosenness. Our chosenness was foretold during the time of our slavery. And as slaves, God would appear to us, and through slavery, then we would internalize a message that we were strangers in a strange land, that we were powerless, that we were outsiders, and we were weak. These narratives then serve as constant reminders for us to create a sense of compassion for others, empathy with the downtrodden, the weak ones, the hungry, and the poor. And empathy demands humility. And so we have no choice. It's a religious mandate to be on the side of those who struggle, to be on the side of immigrants who are without a land, without any sense of control of their own lives, to be on the side of minorities and people of color. We have no choice but to be advocates for the poor, the homeless, and the powerless. And what we see is it's a commandment. So we're in a different place in the world today than we were 100 years ago, and for so long before that. We're small in number, but we're strong. We're influential. And whether it be the American Jewish community or the state of Israel, the challenge then is with strength, with power, with wealth, how do we retain compassion? How do we stand up for those in need and for those who are without? How do we live with humility? I think we do so in a number of ways. And one is that there's got to be a realization that however strong we may feel that we are, and now this is so real, we're living with forces that are much greater than ourselves, that we're part of something that's much bigger than us, that we're connected to all of humanity, and actually we're connected to this universe in a very real way. Yeah, we're special, but we're not so special also. We are part of the human condition. We have to understand that we control this much, and that there's so many forces in the world that are beyond us. So when we live with humility as a model, we live in a different way in relation to our own power. At the end of the day, and I'll repeat this again, I think our tradition is telling us that ultimately, to be strong, you have to have humility. To be influential, you have to have humility. You have to have faith to be powerful. And that faith includes a sense of limitation. As I said, we were enslaved to help us incorporate the meaning of both power and powerlessness. And out of our own struggles, out of our own degradation, out of our own exile, out of our own pain, we've miraculously survived. But we didn't survive and didn't gain power in order to live in this world like others with power have chosen to live, but rather to live in a different way, to be humble. It is to be a light unto the nations, an or legoyim. And that's what makes a difference. And we are such when we live with a sense of our own limitation. There's a lot to learn from being small. And the narrative says that's why we were chosen. Because we were small, because we were without power. And then when we gain our strength and power, we live in the world in a different way. It's there that we find our inner strength. It's in humility that we find God. Shabbat Shalom. We'll turn to the Musaf service in the Amidah Chatzi Kaddish.